Good morning. Well, how do you get a people to suddenly leave the country and move out into the wilderness and start moving back to Canaan? That's the big question. How do you get to do it? And how do you get a people like the Egyptians to let them go? Because by now, of course, they had become a slave race in Egypt, and the people were using them as slaves to do all the manual work which they needed to have done. Imagine just for a moment, we all like our cars. We drive them all over the place. Wherever you go, you see people driving their cars. Almost every family has one. You go up and down streets, you see them parked in the drives. When they actually build houses these days, they've got to be sure that there's enough place to park. When they put up a civil building, there must be parking space because we have so many cars. Imagine for a moment that some prophet was to go to Boris Johnson or the Prime Minister or the country, whoever it might be, and say to him quite simply, God says you have to give up all your cars. Can you imagine what type of reaction that would create? Well, when Moses, we talked about before, I'm not going to go back and talk about his life in his early days. But you know what had happened. He'd been brought up in Pharaoh's palace. He'd gone away for 40 years. He'd come back and he went to Pharaoh and he said quite simply, God says, let my people go. They've been living amongst you now for almost 400 years. Let my people go. They are to move out of Egypt and they're to go back. And the Egyptians said, of course they're not going to go back. We need them. They can't go. Moses comes before Pharaoh and carries out some simple miracles in front of him, throwing his staff on the ground and this type of thing, and putting his hand into his coat and bringing it back out, puts his hand in and comes out leprous, puts his back in and comes out whole, throws his staff on the floor, becomes a snake. Interesting thing is that when he does this in front of Pharaoh, the Egyptian magicians do exactly the same thing. You see, the enemy doesn't want them to leave either. He wants to keep them there as a slave race. And so he enables the Egyptian magicians to actually show Pharaoh that these were simple things that anybody could do. But then, of course, the plagues start to come. And Moses speaks to Pharaoh over and over again. And he says, you must let the people go, because Israel is my firstborn son. I am going to bless this nation. I am going to bring them into a place where eventually they can bring into being the very Messiah. I'm going to use this people, and I am going to come into my own creation through one of these people. In the far distant future, I see this young girl, Mary, and I'm going to come to her, and I'm going to become incarnate in her womb, and I'm going to be born, and I'm going to be a sacrifice for the whole world, that everybody might be able to have eternal life. But first of all, I've got to get this people out of Egypt and back into Canaan. We hear about these miracles. They were astounding miracles. But you see, this was a slave race and the people needed them. They needed them for their everyday activities. They needed them for all the things they were doing. They couldn't possibly let them go. But of course we come to the great and final miracle that Moses proclaims. He says to Pharaoh, after all the things that have happened, he said, in the next couple of days, he says, there's going to be a great event. You will not let my firstborn son leave Egypt and go, so I will kill your firstborn son. I will insist that these people go. And then Moses goes back to his own people and he says, now look, God's going to do something very special in the next couple of days. And he said, you're supposed to take a lamb, you're going to offer it as a sacrifice before God, a fellowship sacrifice, as you meet together and eat this meat from this lamb. But you're going to take some of the blood from the lamb and you're going to put it over the doorpost of your house. The angel of death is going to move through Egypt. When he sees the blood, he will not touch that household. But if the blood is not there, he will enter that household, and he will kill the firstborn of Pharaoh, and he will kill the firstborn of every Egyptian family. Egypt must let my people go. It's the most drastic thing. And when they get up in the morning, the Egyptians find it has happened. They're in such anguish. They say, oh, for goodness sake, get these people out of here. And look, if you want encouragement, we're going to give you things to go with. It says almost that the Israelites almost plundered the Egyptians. The Egyptians were giving them things just to get them out to the country. And of course, Moses leads these people out and into the desert. Well, Pharaoh and the Egyptians had the time of mourning. They buried their firstborn children. They looked around and they found that the slaves had gone. It's almost as if all the cars had gone from this country, you know. All the things they needed, they were not there anymore. And they became angry with it. They said, no, this people have treated us wrong. We carry on with this tomorrow.